Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Cody Carlson, PhD of the Discriminating Gamer YouTube channel, where he reviews a plethora of board games. And in this conversation, we talk about board games and we also talk about history, World War II specifically, and World War II's impact on modern day politics and the conception of the West and the Western identity. You can find his work linked in the description. He has a history channel and a board game channel, and both of them are fabulous. Without further ado, here is Cody Carlson. Yeah. So what got you started into the YouTube land, and what was it like when you started?
I was writing for a paper, just kind of, you know, piece by piece. I wasn't an employee or anything. I was writing for a paper in Utah, and one of the things I had done is I was writing. I was looking for stuff to write about, and I thought, well, I love board games, and they liked the idea of featuring board game reviews, so I would write board game reviews. But my my relationship with the paper, it was I could kind of tell they were going in some different directions, and I didn't think I'd be doing that forever. But I still wanted to review board games, and I just would watch board game reviews, and I thought, I actually had a buddy of mine said, Cody, you should do that. You should make videos. And so that's what I did. I actually, when I started out, I had a few friends. Our first few videos are actually like sketch comedy things about board games, and because I come from a theater background. I did a lot of improv comedy in Utah, and buddy of mine is a great musician, and so we did a lot of different stuff in the early episodes, and then it was kind of too hard to
Yeah,
keep
a lot of
keep
work.
up with that. It was
Yeah.
so I did more of a kind of a standard format, I guess. But
What
when I
what year was
started,
that when you started?
2014, March of
Okay.
2014 is when we started. And I when I started, um, there were a few people that were doing it that were really successful. Not nearly as many as there are now. Of course, the Dice Tower. I mean, the Dice Tower was the first one I saw that kind of got me. I remember the first time I had bought a game like in 2011, and I used to just play like war games. That's like all I would play, like board war games.
Yeah.
And about 2010, 2011, I started to get into the wider world of board games. And I bought Battles of Westeros, which is a Command and Colors game set in the Game of Thrones universe. And I was trying to find resources online for about it, and I saw Tom Vazel from the Dice Tower had done a review. And I remember thinking, "Oh, that's really cool. This is his hobby, and this is what he did." And that was before I was writing reviews, so that kind of got me interested in it. And then I was watching Shut Up and Sit Down too, which is a
Yeah.
British one, and I really like what they did. And again, I was just thinking maybe I could do it. But I was very fortunate too, because not long after I started doing it, and I had some back and forth via email with Tom Vazel. He actually invited me to include stuff on his board game breakfast segment, and so I contributed a lot of stuff to that, and that kind of got me a wider audience. And
Yeah.
again, it just got to be too much, so I had to kind of pull back from doing that as
Scale
well.
back.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you real quick. So are you a board game guy, or I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I remember in probably 2007, 2008, me and my friend started playing Risk a lot and we got bored with
Mhm.
it. So we started making our maps and then we started looking into other board games. And I remember there was San Juan, Puerto Rico, and Princess of Florence. And then it kind of fell off from that. But then every once in a while I'd find a board game via my phone that I'd really like, just a little like Ascension, I think,
Mhm.
and the Kinzia, I think.
Rainer Knizia,
Rainer.
yeah, Rainer
Knizia,
Knizia,
yeah.
yeah.
He's got a lot of those games, and I really like them. But when I met my wife to be, and she had a couple of kids, about I think they were 10 and 12 at that point. I'm like, well, we got to do something. I got to, figure out who these people are, and they got to figure out who I am. So I bought a copy of Carcassonne, which I always
Mm.
liked much more
Yeah.
than that wildly successful Catan. I'm not a fan of that, but and then once we got married and we moved in together, it just kind of became the hobby. And then I just kind of went crazy the last couple of years, like doing
Yeah.
all the different, following all the different themes and figuring out what I like, and watching tons of different reviews and reading the forums and stuff like that. So
There is that moment when you first get into the hobby where you kind of feel like you got to do a little of everything, and you've kind of, I know exactly what you mean. And then you kind of find where you're comfortable with, what you like and what you don't like, and
yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. And then the levels of complexity, and then the style of game. My wife certainly doesn't really like conflict games, but she really loves the puzzle games, Azul,
Mm.
Harmonies, stuff like that. And we just
Yeah.
got finished done with My City, which is a campaign light game, and all
Mm.
four of us played that. We really enjoyed that.
Well, that's
Brilliant.
cool.
Rayner's just a ingenious man.
I actually just played and reviewed a couple of his games, um, Iliad and Icor, which are a couple of
Okay.
two-player kind of asymmetrical um, abstract games.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So war games, when did you start getting into those? Because that has a much longer history than
Mhm.
the what's going on right now, which is kind of a meeting of war games and then like the
Right.
family style games and then all those Euro games.
Yeah, war games. So war games actually were really popular, really became popular in Germany in the late 19th century. Of course, Germany, in 1871 was founded as kind of a militarist state, an empire with where militarist themes were very prevalent. And so they
Would
would
they
have,
be okay being called Germany, or would they call themselves Prussia?
no, 1871 is the
71.
foundation of
Germany.
Germany. The empire was Prussia
Okay.
until 1871.
Oh, okay.
And then you have the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, 1871, and then January of 71 is when the Empire of Germany is created. And they would actually, in newspapers, they would actually have military puzzles, games. How would you do this? That they would publish, and then people would write in with their answers, and the newspapers would, the best answer, they would give them, some kind of an award or something like that.
Really?
And
Huh.
yeah, yeah. And so it was really big. Now, so people in Germany played a lot of war games. That was just a thing to do. And then for some reason after 1945, war games weren't popular. Nobody knows why in Germany. So what the Germans did is they still made really interesting board games after 1945, but they gave them these really
Pacifist
we
themes, perhaps?
well, kind of like farming themes, and
Okay.
potato
Yeah.
growing themes. But they had these really interesting mechanisms, but these just kind of whatever themes. And really, you poo-poo Catan, but actually, Catan in the 90s, when Catan came to America, what we saw was you have these German ideas and these what now we call Euro themes come to America really for the first time, meeting popular culture. And then that meshes with kind of the American tradition of board gaming, which was always we had these really fun and interesting themes and ideas,
Yeah.
but roll a dice and move.
Yeah.
And then with Catan, about the time of Catan in the 90s, these two things kind of come together. Again, Quinn's on Shut Up and Sit Down. He said, it was German mechanisms and American storytelling came together to create
Okay.
kind of this perfect storm for what
Yeah.
we have now.
Yeah.
Now, as far as me in wargaming, it really started when I was about 12 years old. I started playing Axis and Allies,
Okay.
um, which was, a really big game in the 80s as far as, the Milton Bradley Game Master series goes.
Yeah. And
Uh,
that's
my,
a two player, right? Or
well, the original game was 2 to 5 player
okay.
because it was, Germany, Japan versus America, Britain, and Russia.
Okay.
And so I played that a lot. And then, of course, over the years, they had some different iterations of that come out. And I played, and I wasn't a heavy hex encounter war gamer. I mean, I played some, but I wasn't like really heavy into that. I'm more and still today, I prefer kind of lighter war games.
And hex encounters kind of, just for the general normie audience, that it's kind of like chess where you have pieces that you're moving around.
Well, no,
No?
it's a hex encounter is so you have hexes, a game board that's hexes, but it's terrain maps, right? And then the counters are little square cardboard counters that usually have stats on them. You know, they usually represent infantry or armor or artillery, and they have stats like their movement values,
Hmm.
their attack values, defense, sort of things like that. And there's a huge depth of variety in what you can do with these kinds of hex encounter games. Um, but there's some like one called Advanced Squad Leader, which I've never played. I will never play because it just looks like it's too in depth for me. But it really gets into the weeds of like, you know, and I may be
Supply
exaggerating here.
lines and
Well, supply lines, but also things
weight,
like
wind.
the thickness, yeah, the thickness of an armor on it of a tank on its side versus on its front, you know. And so, I mean, it really gets into the weeds with stuff like that. And again, I might be exaggerating a little bit with exactly that, but it's along those lines. And so that to me, that's when you get into the minutia of it. When you make it more of a simulation, less of a game, I'm not as interested.
Okay.
But I do like stuff like Axis and Allies and I don't know if you played Memoir 44. They
Yes.
actually they actually just came out with well, it comes out later this month. I've got my copy now. They sent me, but it's the Battle of Hoth from Star Wars. It's just like Memoir 44, but it's the Battle of Hoth,
Oh,
and
cool.
it's great fun. I was just playing that again last night with my stepdaughter, and it is a great game.
Yeah, my boys will probably love it. I should put it on the
They
list.
probably will.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great. So that's kind of where I was coming from. And then, like I said, when I was I want to say again, it was probably about 2011, 2012 for I think it was Christmas. A buddy of mine and I had been watching the Battlestar Galactica TV show and really enjoying that. And he, for Christmas, bought me the Battlestar Galactica board game. And I got to tell you, he bought me that, and I was kind of disappointed because it wasn't a war game, and that's pretty much all I played. But we went ahead and we played it one night, and it blew me away. And I thought I couldn't
Hmm.
believe a board game could do could provide that kind of experience that game did. And it's still probably my second or third favorite game of all time.
What
Uh,
drew you into it?
so are you familiar with the TV show Battlestar Galactica?
Yes, with Cylons and
Uh-huh.
humans. Yeah.
Uh-huh. The early 2000s version of the show.
Yeah.
So in the show, of course, you have some Cylons that look like they're human. And so a big part of the show was them trying to figure out who was a Cylon, right? So in the game, what you do is you have a series of external threats, and you have like silent spaceships appear that try to attack you and other things. Or you might have like a shortage of water, or you might have, some other kind of systems failure on your ship. And so what you do is on your turn, you can move your figure to a different part of the ship to take different kinds of actions. But then critically, you draw this crisis card, which kind of accentuates these threats. And then everybody around the board has like these different colored cards. And they've, all, the backs are all the same, but the colors are different. And there's number values on them. So what you all have to do is, in order to meet the crisis, to keep something bad from happening, you have to have the correct colors and the right numbers. Any incorrect colors, the numbers on that card act as a negative. So what you do is you actually each secretly contribute a number of cards. And you can say, I can contribute a lot of cards, a few cards, and then you take a couple of random cards from the deck, and then you actually go and you see, did you pass the test or you failed? So essentially what it is one of you is secretly a Cylon, and more of you can become Cylons over the game. And at the beginning of the game, it's possible no one is a Cylon. By the end of the game, at least one of you will be. Perhaps as many as half of you will be. But what you're doing is you're contributing these cards, and the Cylon is secretly trying to sabotage by putting in the wrong colored cards, and nobody knows who it is. So the whole game you are accusing each other of you're the Cylon, you're the Cylon. And I got to tell you, I have had nearly fistfights break out, and it hasn't gone that far, but I mean, but you do because people are lying.
Yeah.
You have to lie and you have to bluff in this game. My good friend Holly, we were playing a game at a convention one time, and it was funny because she was convinced I was a Cylon. I wasn't. And I was convinced she was a Cylon. She wasn't. And we're just screaming at each other. And she looked like she was nearly in tears, but she was given as good as she got. And then the game ends, and her husband was a Cylon, and we both felt like idiots, you know? But it's so much fun. I got another buddy of mine in Texas. I played this game with him half a dozen times. Every single time, I think with maybe one exception, he was a Cylon, and he convinced me he wasn't. I've never been played by
Mm.
somebody like that before, but it was anyway,
Hmm.
it's a lot of fun. Now that game's out of print now, but they've
Yeah.
got
For some
I don't
reason, it's
know.
so popular.
They came out with I got it over here a game called Unfathomable. They came out with here about 2 or 3 years ago, which is the same game, but it's set kind of on a cruise ship in 1912, and it's kind of Cthulhu, and you have sea monsters attacking
Okay.
you, and one of you is like a hybrid. So it's essentially the same game, and in a lot of ways, it's more streamlined than Battlestar
Mhm.
Galactica, the game is. But I don't know. I love the theme of Battlestar Galactica, so that's
Yeah.
still in my heart. I'll never give that game up. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From going back to a historical perspective of board games, because I
Yeah.
find them absolutely fascinating. I think that they are in a way, they are an unknown art form that is just exploding right now. A lot of people don't, they think Monopoly, maybe they
Hmm.
see Wingspan or something in a Target, but
Yeah.
the depth and the richness and the amount of creative energy that's being expended into this domain is just phenomenal right now. It's probably oversaturated. I know people who are in it
Mm.
for 10 years, they're like, oh, it's already the golden age is already past or whatever, because they get tired of that. But
Yeah.
when you were talking about Catan coming over, and I poo-poo it just because it's fun too, but you said, so what are some of these German mechanics? So if we think of American games, we think of Scrabble,
Mhm.
which is kind of a puzzle game with words. Then there's Monopoly. There's a lot of dice chucking, Sorry,
Hmm.
Parcheesi, stuff like that. And then there's all the backgammon and the more classic card games and stuff like that. But what
Hmm.
are some of the examples of the German mechanics?
So yeah, like I said, in the American tradition, like you say, we have these kind of just real basic ideas. And the most basic of all, I think, is roll and move, like for Monopoly. You roll a die, you move that number of spaces. And so these mechanics here in America, that one in particular, often emphasize chance over choice.
Hmm.
And I've dipped my hand into design a little bit. And you've got to have chance, I think, in any game. I love chance in game. I love rolling dice. I love that. But you also want ways maybe to mitigate that chance and to make sure that within that chance, maybe perhaps there are choices to make, because choice is always so much more fun than chance. And that's
Hmm.
what these German mechanisms do, is that they emphasize choice over chance in a lot of ways. Not always, but most of the time.
Okay.
And one of the things too that they do is um, they emphasize well, first of all, in American games, oftentimes you'd have player elimination. German mechanics necessarily wouldn't have player elimination. There's less chance, not always, not in all games, but in a lot of games, less chance of a runaway leader
Hmm.
situation where maybe if something bad happens to somebody, they're not out of the game, but they're penalized in some way, but there's still in theory a path for them to victory,
Yeah.
right? There's oh golly, there's another point I was going to make about German game. Oh, indirect conflict in American games. Very often, it's we're competing. We'll like take a look like a game like Risk, right? Which actually was not an American game. It was did you ever see the movie The Red Balloon about the little kid and he's got the red balloon and it floats away?
Maybe in grade
Okay,
school.
yeah, they showed this that great. The guy that directed that film, he invented Risk. He's the
Oh,
designer of
really?
Risk. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Anyway, but like Risk, you're rolling dice. I'm attacking you. We're at odds. And that's kind of an American way to play a game. And Euros usually one of their aspects is indirect conflict. And
Like worker placement, where
Hmm.
I take a spot away from you rather than attacking you.
Exactly.
I stymie your plans. I'm in your way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're all kind of free to do your own thing. There, like some games have been accused of some Euros have been accused of multiplayer
Multiplayer
solitaire.
solitaire. Yeah.
Yeah, where we're all just doing our own thing, but then indirectly where our paths converge is
Yeah.
where the conflict comes from, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Two of our favorite games. Well, actually, no. One, when I was getting into this, I found Stonemeyer Games, fell in love
Mm,
with their quality of components, and we got
yeah.
Wingspan, and we
Hmm.
played that a few times. And then on a lark, I got a game called Earth. And
Mm.
once we played Earth, we never wanted to play Wingspan again. It's a
Oh,
tableau
really?
builder, so where
Yeah.
you're all kind of making your own island.
Hmm.
And I don't know if there's really, I mean, I guess you're taking cards from, or the opportunity to get cards from each other. And there's a little bit, I think in their expansions, they're getting a little bit more where you can affect each other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the ability to kind of, you're all kind of working out your own puzzle, and there's simultaneous player interaction, so it's pretty snappy. There's this other board game terminology called analysis paralysis, and one of our family game group is very prone to like getting like skitzed out about, do I do this, do I do that, do I do
Yeah.
this, do
Yeah.
I do that. But in that game, we liked Earth because it's really chunky in the components. You're building these things. It's really tactile, and then there's a lot of nature. There's a lot of cards. There's a ton of
Mhm.
theme that emerges out of it, and
A
it really
surprising
captures
amount of
our.
theme in that game, I
Yeah.
think.
And one
Um,
the younger boy, he kind of plays the game. He plays against the game. He tries to get as many negative things happening. He wants to have. There's these disaster cards like
mhm.
thunderstorms and meteor showers. He's trying to collect as many as possible to see how much destruction he can wrought. And then he goes at the end of the game. He plays through his hand and shows like all the disasters that happen on his island. So he's a really storyteller
Yeah.
driven guy.
Yeah, yeah, Earth is great, and I think one of the great things about Earth too, and this is something else that is kind of a mark of good Euros, is when you get to do something fun when it's not your turn,
Yeah.
right? So on my turn, other people can do things. And again, this actually goes back to Catan, because in Catan, somebody rolls the dice and people look and see, oh, do I get something? You know, it keeps
Okay.
people invested even when it's
Yeah.
not their turn.
Okay.
One of my favorite games, probably my second favorite game of all time, is Twilight Imperium Fourth Edition.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that one?
Everybody talks about it. I have not. I don't. We just moved to Spokane, and so I'll have to find a
Oh,
gaming group to
if you yeah, it's
spend a day.
this yeah, exactly. This is like an all day thing. And one of the cool things in that is, now you can't do it every time, but at one point on a player's turn they have these strategy cards, and when they play the strategy card, it lets them do something really cool. But then there's kind of a secondary ability that everybody else can do, but there's a
Yeah.
cost associated with it. But again, it's one of those things. I actually just did a video recently about like my top 10 games that let you do something fun on other players' turns, right?
Hmm.
Because to me that's one of the most exciting things. And again, it's kind of cuts against the traditional American game ideas of it's my turn, I do something, your turn,
Yeah.
you do something. Yeah.
Yeah. Why Twilight Imperium? Why do you think it's such a big gaming favorite?
Well, I think that's part of it. I think it was one of the first. You look at it, and it looks like a quintessential American gaming experience. You've got these big minis, you've got this beautiful map, you got hundreds of cards.
Hmm.
Um, it feels like it's a very
A lot of
big,
character.
exactly, theme American storytelling game. And it's a space game. Who doesn't love great science fiction games, right?
Yeah.
And but yet it's injected with a lot of these Euro ideas. And the first one being that idea of you got to do something fun when it's not your turn. But also it's kind of unconventional too. Like you actually, you don't just move your units, you have to activate hexes, and that allows you to move units into that hex, you know. And
So there's a lot
it's
of things that you have to do before you do the thing that you want to do,
yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And there's a tech tree, there's politics and diplomacy. It's one of those games that's just got whenever I play the game, I feel great when I win a game, but I don't play that game to win. I really don't
Hmm.
play any game to win. I play games to have fun. But to me, one of the big reasons why I play board games, not the biggest, but one of the biggest, is I love the stories they tell. You mentioned they were an art form. They are. To me, when I play a game, it's like watching a movie or reading a book, but I'm a participant. I'm not just a kind of a passive
Yeah.
observer. I help create the story because when that game is over and my friends are like, "Oh, can you remember when this happened? And I rolled that die and this happened." You can relive that, and it's just this great shared experience. And I got to tell you, decades later, I'm still talking about certain games with friends of mine. Remember when
Yeah.
this happened? You know.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's one of the big reasons. You know.
Yeah. Well, in Twilight Imperium, you mentioned what was the game where the Battlestar Galactica, where it creates, I guess, player conflict, but above the board player conflict. What kind of interactions, social interactions, does a game like Twilight Imperium elicit?
Well, again, it's
Is it kind of
it's.
role play-y, I guess?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, because you've got characters like character cards, and they tell you like what your race is, and there's like the Barony of Letnev, which are very militaristic. You've got the Emirates of Hakan, which are very uh trade
Yeah.
oriented,
Economics.
and
Yeah.
you've got the Federation of Sol, which are the humans, which are kind of good, a little bit good at everything.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you kind of lean into those things, and um again, it creates these great stories, and there's throughout the game there's negotiation. Okay, I want to, and it's not like formal. It's like I want to attack you if you want to attack me. Okay, yeah, we're good. Our borders are good. And then at
Hmm.
some point there's a betrayal.
Yeah.
So
It has to happen.
the Fantasy Flight back in the day, they were big, great games like this back in the day, and they came out with the Game of Thrones, the board game, which is a riff on diplomacy. Are you familiar with diplomacy? The game diplomacy?
Diplomacy, there is, I wish I would have taken the notes. There's this excellent documentary series about one board game company that was started in the 50s or the 40s. And they eventually talk about diplomacy in as one of their games. So, what was the publisher of Diplomacy? Do you recall? I think it might be
I
GMT or something.
I no
I
no
might
it
be
was it,
wrong, but
it was for the longest time was Avalon Hill. I don't know if they did
yeah,
it
it was. Yeah,
originally.
Avalon Hill. It was a documentary on Avalon
Yeah,
Hill,
okay.
which is a really great. If anybody's interested in learning the history of that one game company, it does. It has a lot of impacts on the rest of the industry. But
Mm.
yeah, Diplomacy is famous for. There's even stories. There's probably a documentary just about diplomacy, about the insane amount of trickery that goes on when people are playing asymmetrically or over email or over landlines, and they're sending each other like these big pranks to get away with to get what they want out of each other. So it's really
Yeah.
about. So it's really role play
Mm.
centric.
Yeah, in fact, it came out originally in 1958, 1957, 58. So it's been around a long time.
Yeah.
And Diplomacy it was Henry Kissinger's favorite game, and it was John F. Kennedy's favorite game.
Hmm.
And it's a game. The original game Diplomacy it's pre-World War One Europe. You've got seven powers, seven countries in Europe, and very simple rules. Very simple rules. And what it is you have your order session and you have your diplomacy session. So you take like 15 minutes. You meet with everybody you can. You say, "This is what I want to do. I need your help here. Do this, and I'll do this here." And then you all go and you write down your orders and you reveal your orders simultaneously, and then you kind of see how everything works out and who supported who and which armies went where. And it's a game that you cannot win alone. You have to make alliances in the game
Okay.
but as soon as you start getting too big,
Yeah.
everybody's going to turn on you, right? And if you'll indulge me a second, one of my favorite experiences is
I'm
back in the.
here entirely to indulge you. That's why I
Yeah,
have
thank
you.
you.
Okay.
People on my channel have heard this story, but back, 20 years or so ago, even more than that, my I had a bunch of friends and we would play diplomacy religiously, and we were playing a six-player game once. And I was France, and we've been playing this game for like once a week for like 4 months. And I think I won just about every game.
Oh no.
Well, I'm a good liar. So, yeah. So what happened was, very quickly in the game, two players, Russia and Turkey, were kind of marginalized, and they were on the ropes. And I was out ahead, clearly going to win. But then it just occurred to me one time during the diplomacy phase, and just reading people, I had these three friends of mine, two of whom were brothers. And I just thought so I was France, one was England, one was Austria, and one was Prussia. And I remember thinking to myself, they're going to turn on me this turn. They're going to do it. So what I did was I was making all these promises, but then I constructed my orders in such a way that I could hold and I could protect myself. Now, I couldn't attack or anything, but I could hold my empire.
Hmm.
So I wrote my orders that way. And sure enough, they attacked that turn, but I held. They didn't make any headway. So all pretense of diplomacy was off. The three of them would go into a room and work together. And I would and for like about three or four turns, they made no progress. I outguessed them. I did everything.
Wow.
But after a while, one person just can't hold against three people. So
Yeah.
once they were able to kind of get their
Attrition.
forces to bear, they started pushing me back. So I went to my friend Zach, and his brother Sean was England, I think. And I went to Zach and I said to him, "Look, no, I controlled all of Italy. He was Austria, I was France. I controlled all of Italy." I said to him, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you Italy. You will win the game, but I want to be like we used to create peace treaties. I want to be on the peace treaty as on the winning coalition." And he said, "Okay." So he agreed. He took over France and he won. Well, so I didn't win, but I was on the winning side. Anyway, that night, Zach and Sean were driving home, and they got in the worst fight of their
Oh no.
lives
Oh
before or
no.
since. While Zach is driving, Sean starts in the car. They nearly got into an accident over this. And I guess they didn't talk for a few days after that. And it's still just I just think that is so funny. Anyway, that was one of my favorite experiences. And again, this is what I'm talking about, still decades later, talking about some of these
Yeah.
great board game experiences. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, there's a couple of, well, there's a lot of different places I want to go and pick your brain
Hmm.
about. What are the differences between board gaming culture, and RPGs, role playing games? So, Dungeons and Dragons is firmly rooted in the American pop culture. Board
Right.
games, not so much so. What are
Hmm.
kind of the basic general? What do you think? I mean, you've been in this hobby for a long time. What kind of people gravitate towards RPGs as opposed to board games, or what is the possibilities and the the activities that kind of differentiate those two hobbies?
So let me just say right off the bat, I've never been a role-playing game guy. I've never been an RPG guy. When I was about 10 or 11, a buddy of mine, one of the guys who later was part of that diplomacy
Diplomacy.
game who tried to screw me, he bought the Batman role-playing game, and we were so excited. We sat down and we didn't
Yeah,
have a clue how to play. We'd never done it before, and we muscled our way through. And it just, I don't know, I guess it just left a sour taste in my mouth because I'd
didn't
never.
click, or
Yeah, and again, I was too young. I think if we'd had somebody there to teach it to us, it may have been a whole different experience. But yeah, so I've never that's never been something that's interested me that much, and I wouldn't like if somebody said I really want to play this, let's do it. I wouldn't say no, and I'd be willing to give it a shot. In fact, I've seen some role playing games over the years that I thought that might look good. I know Fantasy Flight did a Star Wars role playing game that I thought looked kind of fun, and Renegade Game Studios has a GI Joe one that I like, and I was always a big GI Joe fan when I was a kid, and they make some other great GI Joe games. So I was thinking, oh, maybe that might be fun, but no, I've never really played that. And I think there's a lot of crossover between people who play RPGs and board games. I think people who play RPGs are more likely generally to play board games than the reverse.
hmm,
But I think I mean, I know a lot of people that play both, and to them, there's not that much difference. It's
okay.
it's just what they're feeling like. but again, I think like in any hobby, there's some people who are diehards. This is what I do. This is all I do,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So
The with a role playing game, there's a dungeon master, somebody who is the main
Mhm.
storyteller, who's facilitating all the mechanics. In a board game, not as much. There's not as much freedom of narrative because you're not playing against or with kind of a human game master. The board game is more concrete, I guess. Between everybody, the rules are much more set in stone.
Yeah, it's more contained as a game.
Yeah.
But you know, there's some games that have that kind of dungeon master element to it. The first edition of Mansions of Madness from Fantasy Flight Games, one person would play what was called a keeper, and they it was a haunted house game, and they would set it up, and they would kind of be the haunted house fighting against them and stuff. But there was some the game sets up the story, but there was some decisions the
Yeah.
keeper could make. The problem was it was such a convoluted setup for the keeper. If you get anything wrong, it screws up the
Okay.
game.
Yeah.
So they came out with second edition that was just had an app do all that.
Yeah.
Same thing. There was a campaign for Star Wars Imperial Assault where one person played the Empire and kind of through again this experience they battled the rebels. Um, but then some games, like one of my favorite games of all time, again another top five game of all time for me is Fury of Dracula,
Hmm.
where one of you is Dracula and the others are like Van Helsing and Mina and Lord Godalming and what have you, Dr. Seward. And it's essentially it's like a sequel to Dracula, but the hunters are kind of searching all over Europe to find Dracula. Dracula has hidden movement. He's playing these hidden movement cards. And if the person playing Dracula, if they just run the game sucks. It's not a fun game. So the person playing Dracula kind of has to be willing to risk themselves, has to be willing to put themselves in a disadvantageous position in order to make the game fun for everyone.
Mm.
And you have to expose yourself, let them know where you are in order to attack them and have some battles and stuff like that. And so it's a terrific game. I love that game so much, but you got to have the right person playing Dracula,
Hmm.
or at least someone who knows that aspect of the game.
Yeah. The so you have a PhD in history. Which came first? Board games, I guess, came first before history. Did they
Well,
lead you to the
yeah.
interest in history? Yeah.
So, like I said, so when I was a kid, I was like little kid, I was always really interested in history. I remember being like in the first grade or something, and they're talking about George Washington, and I was thinking, trying to figure out where that was. He must have been a long time ago, like the 1920s, you know? And I remember seeing like movies and stuff with like kings and queens, and then seeing people for like the Roman era, and then the World Wars, and just trying to
Yeah.
figure out where they all fit. You know, I
Yeah.
remember being real little, trying to figure that all out. But again, when I was about 12, I started playing Axis and Allies, and I remember one day I'm looking at the board, and the game starts in 1942, and virtually all of Europe, the Axis are at their height, so virtually all of Europe is kind of Nazi gray. And I remember looking at that board one day and thinking to myself, how did they get so far? How did they conquer? How did the Nazis conquer so much?
Yeah.
And then I remember thinking, now how did we stop them? How did we win? And really, those questions kind of led me on the path to ultimately get to where I am today, career wise. So yeah, I credit Axis and Allies
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
this fascination with the Second World War and all history.
Which is your favorite part of history lately?
Well, Second World War is my
Okay.
field, and I did my dissertation on. So I did a master's degree where I looked at kind of Hitler and Stalin as military commanders, and it was my work was primarily literature based, although I did do some research at the Bundesarchiv in Berlin. But I was kind of really looking at the existing literature, both kind of the Wehrmacht and the Red Army during the war, and how they functioned. Hitler, Stalin, and their generals, really. And my hope was when I got my PhD, I was going to actually study uh, the German army in World War II. My problem is I just don't have the confidence to read German
Oh.
like I would. And I you know I mean I have a good foundation of the language, but I think if you're going to be, so much about history is the precision of language because history ultimately
Hmm.
is the study of written records, right? Written documents.
Yeah.
And I just felt I couldn't do myself justice with the German level I was at. And it's not for lack of trying. I really have tried to learn to read it. And like I say, I still have a good foundation of it, but I'm not fluent. And, so what I did was when I did my PhD, I actually did it on the American Army in the war, American generalship. I looked at George Marshall, who was the chief of staff of the United States Army in World War II, and kind of how he um, chose and relieved combat commanders during the war, specifically field army and corps commanders during the war. And I'm actually working on, I'm revising that into I submitted it to be published, and I've had publishers say, "Well, we want a bigger study." So I'm actually
Two
doing that
pages
right
of
now.
one line, one single space notes on it.
Yeah, exactly. So I was just in Washington D.C. In March. I went there for Circle D.C. the convention, but I was doing some more research while I was there, at the National Archives as well. So I'm working kind of on expanding that book. I'm hoping to have this draft done by the end of the year. So,
Hmm. How does World War II affect us today?
oh my gosh, the world we live in is defined by that war and defined by the decisions that were made during that war. It's it's amazing to me if you go back and you look at like Rome, ancient Rome. If you know anything about like the Punic Wars, I mean, the Punic Wars created the superpower, established Rome as a superpower. And it's kind of similar to kind of what World War II did for the United States, but again, also set the tone for the rest of the world. We created this kind of rules-based order
Hmm.
that begins in the West. It was rejected by the Soviets, and then after the fall of the Soviet Union, pretty much everybody got on board with this rules-based order for a time. This idea of, hey, if you play by the rules, your country will make money,
Okay.
you will be prosperous, and we're cool. But what we're starting to see now is kind of the breakdown of that with we see kind of belligerent countries like Russia, China are kind of rejecting the rules-based order. And I don't think it's going to go well for them in the long run.
Okay.
Um, but anyway, that's a whole nother can of
Oh,
worms.
no, if you don't mind, could you
Go ahead.
define the rules based order? Because
Well,
implied in that is our rules.
yes, the rules that when I say ours, I don't mean America's, I mean the West's.
Okay.
And these are the rules that were created after the Second World War. We have a number of international agreements that are created after the Second World War, economic agreements, and um, it's kind of the idea of there's kind of an understanding after the Second World War that you can't attack another nation and claim its territory, claim its wealth for yourself. It's armed robbery on a national scale. That wasn't necessarily the way it was viewed, certainly before World War One and even up to World War II. Hitler is a very 19th century thinker in a lot of ways when it
Okay.
comes to that sort of thing. And so, like, this is why when Saddam Hussein went to Kuwait in 1990, um, there was such pushback on that because it's like we can't let these dictators just willy-nilly invade other nations and take them over. We have to put them in their place. We have to show them you can't do that. And this is one of the reasons why Ukraine is so difficult, is because we want to put Putin in his place too, but Putin's got this ace up the sleeve called nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
We don't want to escalate anything like that, but at the same time, we don't want to let him get away with this just flagrant violation of international norms,
Okay.
right?
So there's a rules based order is map based stability. I'm trying to get an
Well,
understanding of it because if it's
okay.
deteriorating or if it's possibly deteriorating, then it'd be nice to know the strengths and weaknesses of this
Yeah,
system.
it's well, part of it is respecting established borders of
Okay.
any nation has sovereignty, respecting their sovereignty. A big part of sovereignty is their borders, right? So respecting a nation's borders, but also too, I mean, economically, and I'm not an economist by any means, but this idea of you're not going to do things that kind of screw over everybody else. Like if when one of the reasons why Saddam invaded Kuwait is because Kuwait decided they were going to just start pumping as much as they could, and it depressed the prices of oil, right? You
Yeah.
could argue Kuwait was not acting in everybody's best interests when they did that. Certainly not in the region's best interest when they did that. They didn't deserve what they got with the invasion, but but that would be an example of kind of screwing with the uh
Economic stability and border stability.
yeah.
So
And
rules
then
based
when
order
you
is like emphasis on order, as in more or less stable
yeah
economic
yeah
and
preventing
power centers.
preventing uh well, I guess a good way to say it is maintaining the status quo, because there is a belief in the West the status quo is the best possible provides the best possible outcome for the most number of people.
Yeah.
Again, if you buy into this, you can be prosperous. You can be, it's like when we look at China today. China is rattling their sabers about Taiwan. And they're doing that largely for domestic consumption. They're telling their own people, we're going to be united. But the,
Hmm.
but the problem with that is, obviously, when you say things for domestic consumption, obviously they find their way into the real world. And China has a lot of demographic issues. They've got a lot of their own economic issues they're dealing with that are just going to get worse in the coming. I was watching a thing another day from an academic talking about how they're really worried. The regime in China is really worried they won't see um, their their century mark for the regime, the 2049. They won't see that
Oh,
because they're scared they're going to be overthrown. China has this long history of peasant uprisings and stuff like that. So, like, the absolute most important thing for the Chinese regime is to maintain order
yeah.
of their own people. And so this is one of the reasons why they're trying to kind of direct out. Well, everybody's the enemy. The West is the enemy. The Taiwan is the enemy. They're trying to redirect that energy outward, um, and they
To
want to
deflect.
right to deflect from their own problems. And but they keep talking about Taiwan. We're not going to let them invade Taiwan. There's going to be consequences if they were to try to invade Taiwan, and I don't think they will. At least not anytime soon. They don't have any history of major amphibious operations. China does not know how to do that. They have no practical application for that sort of thing.
Hmm.
They can cause a lot of problems. Um, but I don't think and they know too, the regime knows if they try to take Taiwan, if they go all out, if they put all their cards down and they go all out to invade Taiwan and it fails, that's the end of the regime. The regime's not going to survive that, you
If they
know,
fail.
if they fail.
Yeah.
And so that's a pretty big gamble on their part. But it when they use this rhetoric again, it kind of makes people nervous, and it again potentially there's the threat to the you know the international order that has been established since World
Yeah.
War II, which is all about, I mean, the whole point of the United Nations, as flawed as that organization is, the whole point of the United Nations was to prevent aggression, was to prevent wars. And it's funny too, because the well, I could go down a rabbit hole here, but anyway.
Please. No, please.
Well, I was just going to say, so the Soviet Constitution of 1936, 1935, 1936, I think. Um, it's got this preamble where it says something to the effect of every Soviet citizen can vote. If you're of age, men, women,
One
whatever.
man, one vote once.
Yeah, right. But then if you look in the actual text of the Constitution, it says the candidates will be provided by the party or Commissal or other, communist agencies. So there's no real choice, right? Oftentimes, if there are two votes, if there are two candidates that you were voting for, they represent the exact same things. So there's no real democracy, right, in the Soviet system. And throughout history, you kind of see sometimes that kind of rhetoric that sounds really good, but when you look at it, it isn't. And like when they created the United Nations, it says every state, every member of the General Assembly will get one vote.
Hmm.
But the only agency that really has any teeth is the Security Council. The permanent members of the Security Council, which are China, America, Russia, England, and France. And any one of those can veto action, right? Well, in the post-war world, Russia, everybody knew Russia would be the aggressor. And yet they give it the power to veto the ability to stop aggression.
Hmm.
And the only reason why the UN was able to vote to go into Korea is because Russia was boycotting the UN at the time. They weren't there to issue their veto. Had they been there, there would have been no Korean War, and Korea would be unified under communist leadership today.
Hmm.
So anyway, I don't know how I got in this rabbit hole, but a lot of these systems are undemocratic and deeply flawed, I think,
Yeah.
at their heart. So,
In board game terms, is the rules based order post World War II rules based order, is that fun? Could you make a game out of that?
oh, people
Yeah.
have. Um,
Does that
there's a
provide enough
game.
agency for all these different interest groups to?
There was a. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no. Go on.
There's a game I played recently called New Cold War, which is four-player game, up to four players. And one of you is America, one of you is EU, one of you is Russia, and one of you is China. And in the game, there's kind of a co-opetition element because you've got Russia and China are kind of a team, and US and EU are kind of a team. But there's only one winner. But like there's a thing where you've got cards and you can play them for the kind of like any CDG card driven game. You can play a card for its event or for the operations points that let you do things. But some of the events you want played or you don't want played, and you, for whatever reason, you're not going to be able to activate them. So you give them to another player, to your teammate, in the hopes that they will play it so something good will trigger for you on their turn. But that kind of covers the last 20 years or so.
Okay.
And so that kind of gets into it deals with a lot of and real world events. It kind of deals with that. There's another one came out a few years ago called Europe Divided, which was by Dave Thompson, one of my favorite designers. And it's pretty cool because he used dice to actually kind of mark influence in different nations, like how much influence you have. But it's kind of, again, EU versus Russia over Europe. And then there was one that came out again a couple of years ago called Flashpoint South China Sea, which is essentially America and China kind of trying to gain influence over all these like Pacific, um, Asian Pacific nations. And again, the idea is China's trying to kind of bump up their rhetoric. United States is trying to cool things down,
Yeah.
and that's a real kind of fun, fast two-player game. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering from your experience in history, studying history and being a historian, what kind of muscle? The cliche is that those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And now you probably have a number of different riffs on that. But how does a historical perspective help us digest the thing we call news?
oh, that's good.
Especially in an internet age where there's always a current thing, there's always a current crisis, and if you're ever on Twitter or other social media sites, everybody switches their expertise. Like from one day, like they're a
Mm,
virologist, the next day they're a historian of Ukraine Russia relations, then the next
right.
day they know everything about the Middle East. But so there's all these different flashpoints of attention, and then a bunch of people just standing in the way of the attention because there's a lot of influence, or you can get money and prestige by being the mouthpiece of any given event. But that still doesn't, but we're still just awash in information. And I'm wondering how studying history has developed your ability to kind of see the world as it is, even though the world is too chaotic to actually see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it comes down to perspective. And I think one thing we see with social media and unfortunately with journalism writ large these days is, sensationalism. You always paint the worst case scenario. You always make things bigger than they are. And I think a knowledge and understanding of history kind of makes you understand there's a lot more factors than you just kind of see at the surface level. Because I think that's all journalism really has time for these days.
Yeah.
Most journalism is just showing you kind of what's on the surface, right? Um, so much so when people say, Russian jets are doing this, they're flying close to our border, that okay, that I mean, stuff like that's happened, similar stuff's happened throughout history.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean war.
Talking about that red balloon movie, there was that balloon incident a
Yeah,
few years
exactly.
ago.
Exactly. And yeah, you kind of understand that even like in our conversation here, I'm saying Russia and China. Russia and China are not these kind of monolithic entities any more than the United States is. You have different factions in these countries that want different things, that think things are different. And you need to, I mean, we saw, like, for instance, under Mao, China was just this, in the 70s, was just this constant revolutionary state that flares up during the Cultural Revolution and stuff like that. But there were already people that weren't on board with that. That's who were being consumed by that. Deng Xiaoping was actually, I think, sent to a labor camp during that, and then after Mao, he kind of becomes the head of the
Hmm.
country. And in 1979, he says, to get rich is good. He's a communist. So there's always these different factions and different ideologies that are playing out in different countries. And things are even in dictatorships. And so things are never quite as simple as I think the media and journalism and people on social media want to point out. What's that old saying? Uh, Journalism is the first draft of history. Well, usually it's a pretty bad draft,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you can't, a journalist cannot do the kind of investigation and analysis that only comes with time
Hmm.
and perspective. And even today, we had, in the 90s, the Russian archives opened up, and we learned so much about the Soviet Union. And now you can't get into them again, right?
Oh,
Yeah, it's very difficult. I actually had a professor of mine who was a Napoleonic scholar, and he had friends that went to Russia. They wanted to find archival stuff from the Napoleonic era. And when they were there, if you go to an archivist in Russia, you've got to grease their palms. You
yeah.
have got to, I mean, you've got to bribe them to get into stuff. And then if you want to look at stuff in the Soviet era and World War II, it's virtually impossible for a Western historian to get into that stuff right now. So,
Hmm. You brought up how you're a good liar, and there's a little bit of glee that you were expressing about being a bad person within the context of a board game. A couple of the games that my wife doesn't like are games. There's a game called Sheriff of
mm,
Nottingham where you
yeah.
have to lie, and she just doesn't like even simulating bad behavior. She's got a really strong moral guidance, so she can't suspend that. I'm wondering how board gaming allows you to, power fantasy, but what does it teach you about your own moral compass, or what does it teach us about morality?
That's a good question.
Because
So
you're
when I
really trying to
play,
destroy other people in a lot of games, or
Mhm.
lie to other people. You're doing you're being a bad guy, even if in your own mind, you're the
Mhm.
hero of the story.
If let's say you're in a wrestling match and the goal is to take down the other guy. Both sides that go into that wrestling match, or a boxing match for that matter, both sides that go into that match know there is a good chance, almost a certainty, you're going to physically hurt the other person at some point. There's going to be some pain involved in that. But you both accept that. You both agree to that because you realize you're doing something more than just you're not just being sadist. You're not just being you're trying to have a competition. You're trying to inspire people. Um you're trying to prove something, and we all agree to it. Now if one guy just goes up to somebody and just starts punching him, that's something else. But
Yeah.
when you both agree to something, you accept it. And the same is true with board games. If you're playing a game like Secret Hitler, I don't know if you're familiar with Secret Hitler.
I've heard of it, but I haven't played it.
It's a game where you're parliamentarians in the Reichstag in the 1930s, and some of you are liberals and some of you are fascists, but you don't know who is who. And the fascists are trying to get Hitler into power, the liberals are trying to stop him.
Hmm.
And again, it's the same thing. You are frequently lying. You are frequently lying. Well, if you're the fascist, you're lying. If you're the parliamentarian or you're the liberals, you're usually telling the truth. But and it's like Battlestar Galactica. If you're the Cylon, you're frequently lying. And again, you go into that game accepting, I want everybody to have fun. I want to have fun. I want everybody to have fun. And that's going to
Mm.
require me, within the context of the game, to be dishonest. That does not make me a dishonest person. That does not make me a liar generally. It's within the context of the game.
Hmm.
And I can understand people being uncomfortable with that. I totally get it. And I totally get, not every game is for everybody. But I I personally have absolutely no problem in a game like that lying my butt off to achieve my ends because we all agree to what the
Yeah.
game is when we begin it.
It's a fair fight,
Exactly.
but still a fight. You brought up this word. I don't even want to ask it, but I have to because it's a sensitive word. Fun.
hmm
What is that?
Okay,
How
so
do you know what's happening?
whenever I whenever I do like top 10 lists or stuff, unless there's some specific thing I'm looking at, my default is I always rate games on how much fun I have, how much fun I have. And again, fun is one of those things that is subjective because somebody can play a game and have a tremendous amount of fun and somebody else not. If you were looking for a scientific definition, the best thing I could say is a game that can consistently shoot dopamine
Hmm.
into your brain and make you have that experience those feelings of pleasure. Last night I was playing that Battle of Hoth game, Commands and Colors Battle of Hoth game with my stepdaughter. And the AT-ATs, the big Imperial walkers, they're like armored. They're hard to kill. You have to roll dice, and if you get hits, you have to roll the dice again to confirm the hit in order to take it down. And she's got those walkers coming at me, and I'm rolling the die, and I get my first hits. And there's just a moment where like
Yeah.
anything can happen. You don't know what's going on. And she's just on pins and needles, and I'm on pins and needles, and I roll the second die, and it confirms, and it hits it. And it's not supposed to happen. The odds are completely against it happening, but it happens. And it's just, I couldn't help it. I jump up, I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's fun. And even when I'm on the business end of something like that, it's like, oh man, shoot.
Yeah.
Um, I don't get. Oh, I don't want to say I don't get upset. I guess I do sometimes, but I mean, I
But even that is contained in
yes,
one way or
yes, I would,
another. Yeah.
I would so much rather have lows like that if I have the possibility of getting the highs. I mean, it's in a way, it's almost. I think it's very similar to gambling. Now, I don't gamble. I'm not a gambler, but I think it's that same kind of thing that's going on, the same kind of dopamine hit, and the same kind
Yeah.
of experience you're having.
I think it has to do with being fully invested in the fantasy. Like
Absolutely,
really just absolutely in that moment. Outside of the norm and in this heightened sense or heightened state
absolutely,
of being.
absolutely.
What are your like solo ventures? Do you dabble in solo games and what's
Um,
the
Sometimes, I used to not do solo games at all. I used to think, I'll tell you right now, the number one reason I play board games, hands down, far and away, is spending time with people and having those shared experiences with people. People are the most important thing. And I cannot tell you how many great friendships and relationships I have built around a board game that I've started in a board game or I've strengthened through board gaming. I love the way games bring people together. I don't think there are very few things that can do it in a very short amount of time. I remember I was doing a play one time. There was a guy in the cast I didn't know at all, and we played a game, and for 30 minutes we were best friends. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And it just draws people together. So I was reluctant really to do solo gaming because that aspect obviously isn't there. But as but I started playing solo board games just because it's part of the channel. Sometimes I get some solo games to review, and then after COVID, of course, they really started.
Yes.
Got to be a lot more, and so I do, and I don't. It's funny because I've got on my tour review shelf. I've actually got several solo games, and it's sometimes it's hard to motivate myself. Like when I've got people coming over, okay, I got to learn these rules. I got to get ready. There's some motivation there, and there's less motivation for me to do the solos, but I do. I do enjoy them. I do have fun with them. And again, there's still some of those moments with the die rolls or the card play that, and it's fun, in any game, solo or otherwise. It's always fun just to see what the designers have done and what they've created and the experiences they create. And again, you can still kind of have that same storytelling aspect of the game, which I love, in a solo game. Very often you do. Some solo games I've got that just tell great stories every time I play them. Um, so that's yeah. I mean, all things being equal, I'd much rather play a game with someone else, but I do enjoy solo games from time to time.
Well, how do you? What are your tips and tricks on starting a gaming group? How do they form and
Well,
how do you
that's a
manage
tough
it?
one. So
Yeah.
I lived in Utah virtually all of my life until I was about 41. So I always had friends. I had about three or four different gaming groups when I started
Okay.
the channel. So I had no shortage there. Then in 2017, I moved to Texas to work on my PhD. And I got down there and I was very fortunate because I'd mentioned it on my channel. I was moving to Texas. And I was very fortunate because not long after I moved down there, I found a guy down there who kind of had a bunch of buddies. And he would do something that every like January and August, he had a big house. He would have what he called Game-a-thon, and he'd have like friends from all over Texas that come and like for 3 or 4 days. It was just like a mini convention with buddies.
Yeah.
So I played with him a lot. So I found him. That was just kind of dumb luck on my part. But then also too, before long, I was able to find um, other students in my program that I played with, and I ended up. By the time I left Texas, I had some healthy groups that I could play with.
Hmm.
Then I came back to Utah for about a year after I graduated, and again I had my Utah buddies I could play with, and then I got my first full-time job in Wyoming, and that was rough. Now the first year. It turned out that the professor who was next door to me, my office next door, also happened to live next door to me in the apartment complex. And he was about 27. He's a communications PhD, and he did video games. And he was not a huge board gamer, but he'd come over and he'd play board games with me, and so I got that. And then through him, I actually met another guy in our church who was a big board gamer, and I ended up playing with him. And I met another guy through the church, and so I had kind of a small group that was pretty good, pretty consistent there in Wyoming. And then I moved here to Utah, or sorry, to Idaho, where I am now. And after I moved here again, I'd made a video where I said I'm in Idaho now, and again, dumb luck. Well, I guess I don't know. Maybe it was
Put
smart
out
making
the
the video.
call. Yeah.
Yeah, one guy said, "Hey, I yeah, I live not too far from where you are," and he did. He lived just up the road from me, and that's Ray. And if you've seen the channel lately, Ray does a lot of our
Yeah.
unboxings and stuff, and he does reviews as well. And he's just started his own channel, which has got a lot of good stuff on it. And yeah, he and I just like immediately hit it off. And we speak the same language. We speak board gameese. And so he and I have he's done a lot to help the channel. I mean, he's just been great. And he's just a good guy too. Helped me move a few times, but really good guy. But anyway,
You just like moving, huh? Is this part of your
well, the
thing
last few
since
years,
you're
like I say,
41?
most of my life was 41 years. I was in Utah, and then I've moved like several times since then. But anyway, he had some friends that kind of got involved, and then actually have had a couple of other guys that are part of our regular game group now, who again also saw me just mention that I was in Idaho,
Yeah.
and they both started coming. So I've got a regular group here in Idaho that we usually play games, usually about once or twice a week, more often twice than
Oh,
not.
wow.
Yeah, so we get together and we usually knock out one or two games a night, and you kind of got to do that with the volume of games I got coming in. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's good. So anyway, I guess my way is I've had a channel that I've been able to
Yeah.
tell people, and that's way I know Board Game Geek has there's some feature on
The
there that helps you
forums and something. Yeah.
help you find like-minded people, and of course one of the things I think would probably be good is a lot of times your local neighborhood game stores will have like cork boards and stuff, and you can say, hey, this is my gaming group, that's an option too. But like I say, my siren's call from YouTube has been very
Yeah.
helpful in
Yeah.
forging my game groups.
Is there a game? There's this concept of weight in games, easy to complex. I guess complexity is kind of part of it. Are there, like, how do you know when a game is too complex? And are there games that like stretched you and kind of surprised you that you still liked, even though it was a little bit beyond what you'd
Yeah,
normally?
yeah. I today have a much higher tolerance for complexity than I used to. When I was younger, well, I mean, really what it was is I like to play war games and I like to play Axis and Allies. That's what I like to play. And then occasionally another game here. Well, okay, this one isn't bad. This one isn't bad. And I remember like Tide of Iron from Fantasy Flight Games. I remember I didn't want to play that because it had card play in it. I'm like, I don't want to play that in a war game. But then I actually got it and it was really a lot of fun, So you kind of baby steps and you do more things. Now, having said that, there are still games that are more complex than I like. There's still games I find there are less games that I'm absolutely unwilling to even tackle, like ASL or something. But I I find if there's a game that I want to play and that I want to learn, I'll take the time. And
Yeah.
fortunately, I've got this game group I've got now is probably the most mature gamers I've ever had, and I mean that both literally and figuratively. I'm the baby of the group of this group I've got, but they're most of these guys are willing to read the rules before game night, which
Yeah.
is I cannot tell you how helpful that is. Because usually I've always been the guy that does that. Not always. I've had some other friends that do it, but here it's nice to know I'm sitting down with people who are prepared and we can get into the game. Because some of the games are tough nuts to crack. I played a game recently. I'm not going to say which one it was.
Oh no.
A game recently that came out a month or two ago, and they sent me the copy, and I was really excited because it's an IP game. It's an IP that I really like, and I played the game, and I got to tell you, from reading the rule book, Ray and I had a hardest time figuring it out. And then some more videos have come out. We've learned it. We played it a second time, and it worked. It clicked, and it's a
Okay. It
good game.
clicks.
And it's a good game. But there was a learning curve on that one that just we were kind of we could not figure it out for the longest time. So
Yeah.
just not a well written rule book.
Are you a professor? Do you teach?
Yeah, I am a professor. Technically, my title is instructor of history at the College of
Oh.
Western Idaho.
How to make history or how to read history?
Well, I teach. They hired me to teach Western civilization courses because
Hmm.
my master's, of course, is in European history. My PhD is in American military history, but they hired me to teach Western Civ courses. I've taught a couple of American history courses here, but um, yeah, I teach West Civ. I teach West Civ 1 and 2. I teach a course on Introduction to History, which is about making history, about writing history, you know. And and then I do a course called Themes in Western History, where like each semester I can create a course like I did last spring. I did a course on Nazi Germany. I've done that a few times. I'm teaching for the first time in the fall. I'm teaching a course on World War One. I'm really excited. I haven't taught that yet. And then in the spring, I'm going to teach a course on World War Two, which I have taught before. So
Oh, fun.
yeah.
What is in my work? I interview a lot of people over a lot of different topics, and one refrain is about identity. And one level, there's all these different levels of identity. The personal identity, people wrestling with that, the group communal identity, and then a historical identity. Probably one of the biggest levels of identity, or the broadest levels of identity, is to be a Westerner. And there's a lot of contention. Maybe there always has been, but it seems like there was a pretty strong consensus it's been argued about. I'm wondering, from your historical perspective, what gives the West its identity, and what
Oh, that's
what is
interesting.
that about the West that you would have young people to really believe in? Like, what is there to
Right.
cherish, and how to cherish the West?
Well, first of all, before I directly answer that question, uh, Western civilization classes as college courses and kind of acknowledging the West at that level and through this lens really began in World War One, and it kind of began as a way to suggest the Germans weren't really Western. It
Oh,
was kind of the
really?
Anglo.
So there
It
was
was
an
really yeah.
exclusiveness to
It
the
was kind of this
definition.
Anglo-American Franco um, idea of being Western, and so it was kind of it was almost a wartime tactic to kind of say, well, but and of course the Germans, when we fought in World War One, we fought for this idea, in the Britain, France, and America. We fought this idea of democracy. This is one of the reasons why America wouldn't get involved in the war while Russia was under the czars, because the Russia wasn't fighting for democracy. Well, as soon as they have their February Revolution, it looks like they're going to become a democracy. America says, "Yeah, we're on board now." But the Germans and the Austrians, they fought for culture with a K, the German culture, right? Which
Yeah.
is not kind of a universally
No, it's
exportable
not. It's
idea like democracy
particular.
is.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's kind of where kind of the modern beginnings of, I think, that term really come from. But if we're going to look at this term Western today, uh, Victor Davis Hanson, of course, is a historian. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Um,
Very familiar sounding, but I'm
he
slipping
does
my
he
mind
does a
now.
lot of he does a lot of political stuff today, but a lot of his
I see. I've seen.
historical.
I've watched some of his
Yeah.
videos. He's.
Uh,
Yeah.
a lot of he was actually on my doctoral committee,
Oh, really?
and yeah, and he kind of goes back and he look, he's a classicist, and he looks back at ancient Greece,
Yeah.
and of course his whole thing is, cultural choices matter, right? Which I tend to agree with. But he says, you look at ancient Greece, and the ancient Greeks kind of really begin a few things that kind of underline Western civilization. And it's not like it's a straight shot all the way up from ancient Greece to the present day. There's rocks and valleys, but there's certain things that they gave the world that really are bedrock foundational principles of even today Western civilization. Things like the concept of a citizen over a subject, um, freedom of speech. Right, when the Greeks fought at Salamis against the Persians, they wrote these. They named their ships after these cultural values as they fought the Persians there. Right,
Really?
if a
That's the
if
big. That's propaganda. I didn't know existed back
exactly,
then.
if a Greek said to his commander, "Hey, this isn't working. Let's try this," the worst thing that's going to happen is that commander is going to hit him on the side of the head and said, "Get out of here," or he might incorporate it and things might get better. Now, if you make a suggestion to the king of Persia, he's going to cut your head off for daring to speak to him like that. You know what I
Okay,
mean? To
so there's
dare
some
question him.
sort of line between the authority, the sovereign, and I guess the citizen, as opposed to the
Yeah, yeah,
subject.
but just the idea too of being able to speak freely there, right? You had people like Aristophanes writing these comedies that were criticizing their superiors. That
Yeah.
was the ancient world equivalent of Saturday Night Live, But scientific inquiry, um, airplanes don't crash in North Korea, right? They don't have airplane crashes in North Korea, right? They don't have airplane crashes in the Soviet Union. They just don't, right? But when a plane crashes in the United States, we have within minutes federal, state, local authorities. You've got, the pilots union, the airline, other organizations, professional organizations. You've got, the FBI, the FAA. All these people converge, and they're all asking the same question: Why did this plane go down? And that makes flying safer. That is scientific inquiry in action, right?
Okay.
That's a very Western principle there too, right? Um, Infantry, the prioritization of infantry and militaries is a Western idea. If you look at, like, say, the great Muslim conquests, they were largely horsebound armies. If you look at the the Mongols and whatever, they largely horsebound armies. Infantry drilling and preparation. When drill infantry. When our guys are overseas fighting, they're trained. Take your shot, one shot or three shots. Take your time, find your target. Whereas a lot of our enemies with their AK-47s are just kind of spray and pray. And that's a real, again, that's something that's ingrained in the Western, is this prioritization of infantry over cavalry. When the at the Battle of Tours in 732, um, the Muslim horse armies could not break the French knights, the Frankish knights, because well disciplined infantry could easily fend off horses. Um, and if those lines
That's such
broke,
a random fact, but it probably has repercussions for the mindset of the people who practice that. And I would assume discipline and then individualism, but
yeah.
a collective individualism, the relationship between the individual and the collective
Well, yeah,
is arranged and
well,
such.
it's interesting you bring that up because individualism, I would say, is another one of these values. In fact, DDH wrote a book called Carnage and Culture, and he talks about a lot of these values. He talks about individualism, and he uses the example of the Battle of Midway, where a lot of those pilots were kind of making decisions in their cockpits that, within the
Hmm.
context of their training, was able to help them, defeat those Japanese carriers. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of these cultural values that kind of come to define what it is to be Western. Also, too, kind of putting kind of what's what we're looking for, kind of a public, um, putting public good over individual good, and again,
Hmm.
if you're in a lot of countries and you're a public official and there's a job opening, well, I'm going to put my brother-in-law in there, or I'm going to put my cousin in there. Whereas here, no, you're going to have an inquiry. You're going to try to find the best person for the job, all things being equal.
Yeah.
So stuff
Which
stuff
they
like
aren't,
that.
but still, yeah.
There are exceptions, but it's just accepted in a lot of cultures. Here, at least, there's an attempt to find the best person. At
Yeah.
least in theory. But I think so. I think a lot of these things are kind of bedrock cultural principles that so the Greeks. Um, Come up with a lot of these. And democracy itself is a Western idea, right? It begins in Greece. Everywhere in the world where there's a democratic system, its great granddaddy is Athens. And it's
Hmm.
funny too because you look at one of the things I do is in my Western civilization classes, I'll put up a picture. It's kind of outdated now, but I put Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, up there, and I say, now he's the president of Iran. Does the office of president, is that indigenous to Iran? Where does that come from? Okay, so Iran is a republic, right? It's a theocracy, but it's a republic. Why does Iran feel the need to cloak itself in this facade of a republic when it's this theocracy and they have a supreme leader that runs everything? Why do they feel the need? And it's because there's kind of an understanding around the world, largely spread through Western values, that democracy equals legitimacy,
Hmm.
and that you cannot be a legitimate government if you don't have the consent of the people. That's why communist states always call themselves democratic,
Hmm.
the German Democratic Republic. It wasn't really democratic, but they call themselves democratic because, again, they say we're legitimate because we represent the people, right?
Hmm. The what you said that, and I'm learning a lot from you, which goes to say I'm really ignorant. So thank you very much for filling in some gaps in my knowledge. But the
Well,
concept of the West.
I was just going to say, I learned a hell of a lot from you about what happened at Evergreen. And so I don't think I watched them all, but I watched a lot of your videos on that. And that was really, being an academic myself, that was
Yeah,
an eye opener.
that's a whole other can of worms.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But the one aspect of the discourse right now that I find there's a lot of tensions in and a lot of talking around it's a reformulation of what you said about the concept of the West coming to bear in World War one, where the Germans, the Prussians, or those people, the Austrian Germans, were concerned with their culture and the particularity of what it means to be them and to have their own aesthetic and their own sovereignty, as opposed to the Western ideal, which is more democratic and slightly more it's a broader idea, but it does have a particularity to it. Liberalism, Anglo-Saxon derived common law that has a pedigree that comes from that particular heritage. And right now, the West is, I see a lot of the discourse being articulated around the tension between the globalist or the universalist value set and then the particular, and to what degree does our particular identity come to bear over who we are as a people. And it comes to bear in a lot of the political discussions around immigration. To what degree is immigration good or bad? How much immigration is possible and feasible, and the watering down of that particular culture. And then also a lot of neuroticism, which I think is derived from how World War II shook out, about, is it good to have pride in your people or pride in your, I mean, the Nazis really bored down, turned up that particular, that dial about the particular and the pure and the culture. So I'm wondering, what is historically, like, what is the best way for somebody to arrange their identity as, I guess I'm an American, I'm a white American, and, as opposed to all these other, even Europe is having a hard time with what is it to be a Briton or English or German. So I'm wondering, I know it's really fraught territory. I'm
No, it's
casting
that's
a
fine.
broad net. So, but the West has room. It seems like it has room for all this particularity and this identity, as long as there's this understanding to some degree of openness and liberalism with regard to the other.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things I talk about in my courses is I do my Western Civ courses. I do sections on kind of obviously like the concepts of nationalism and socialism. And one of the things I say is very often both of those concepts have kind of benign and malignant forms.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at nationalism, obviously the malignant form is very obvious. That's Nazism, that's fascism, that's this kind of racial integration of characterization of the state and injected with these value judgments about, well, some people, some races with their state are better than others. Now, obviously, that's rubbish, right? That's horrible. We don't want to go down that road ever. But then I would say you do have a benign form of nationalism, which, in my opinion, is just good old-fashioned patriotism, which I think is a
Hmm.
good thing. I think it's a good thing, and I think you want it because you know people in Massachusetts live quite a bit different. I mean, have there's a bit of difference between people in Massachusetts and say Utah or Alabama, right? And yet, for all of our differences, we probably all of us learned the story about Washington chopping down the cherry trees again. Well, I don't know if they still teach that today, but that's kind of a cultural
Yeah.
myth that kind of binds us, right? But also, too, a form of nationalism is, we use a common currency throughout the United States
Yes.
with symbols that we all know and we all
Well, we
recognize.
pay a common tax, so all
Exactly.
things
Yeah,
being
we
equal, which they
all have
aren't.
to deal with the IRS. Yeah, exactly. So there's stuff like that, but I think I think patriotism and recognizing your own unique cultural achievements is a good thing. Now, and having said that, I think my take is, and I'm probably not an expert, but on the outside looking in, I feel like patriotism like that is really kind of dying in Europe, if it's not dead already. I think the Brexit vote was not so much a kind of assertion of British nationalism as it was just kind of a rejection of what British people saw as kind of what the elites wanted, and they didn't want kind of that kind of elitist idea for them. But I
Hmm.
mean, it's hard to imagine, somebody in Germany expressing any real form of patriotism the way we do here in the States. I remember I had a professor who was his field was Nazi Germany, and he was hosting some German historians, and they were in Washington D.C. And there was I can't remember where he said they were, but there's a mural, and it showed things like the triumph of the Union in the Civil War, and it showed the
Hmm.
moon landing and all these high points of American history.
Achievement,
And
yeah.
these Germans said we couldn't have a mural like that. They said
Yeah.
that if we wanted to celebrate something, we'd have to go back to like the reforms during the Napoleonic Wars, where essentially they created the education system that we all know and love today, the Germans, and other reforms that they did at that time. Says that's how far back we'd have to go to have something to really celebrate, which I think is unfortunate. I think because I think I'll tell you right now, I love Germany. I've been to Germany a few times. I think it's such a great country, great, warm, loving people, and I think yeah, they have a very troubled past, but I think they've got a lot to be proud of today.
You said you dabbled in game design. What's your creative aspect in this hobby that takes up probably 5/3 of your basement? I'm gonna guess.
Well, I'm in a kind of a bonus room above a garage is where I'm at right now. But yeah, and you're not wrong. It's because I've got my these are my collections here and over there, and I'm facing my shelf with all my to play games, the games I need to review. So it's like, ugh,
Oh
first world
yeah,
problems, right?
yeah.
Um, what was the question?
Um, oh, how you've taken that hobby and
Oh,
dabbled in being creative with it, producing.
so I've over the years I've tried to do a little bit, and then about in 2012, wow, was that long ago? I read a book by David King on the Congress of Vienna,
Hmm.
and which is the peace conference after the Napoleonic Wars. And I was reading that book and I was thinking, this would make a great game. And so I worked on a game and I designed a game, and it was my friends liked it, and it's always when you do stuff like that with your friends, you don't know if they're just blowing smoke, they're telling you what you
Yeah.
want to hear you. But my friends seemed to like it, and I kind of over the years would tinker with it here and there. And I in 2017 I sent it off to a company, and they were kind of looking at it for a while. I don't even think they played it until 2019. I actually was back east, and I was on my research trip for my dissertation, and I stopped there and we played it and stuff. They really liked it. They were interested in it. They wanted to develop it, and the next year they sent me a contract. But the contract said that they would have ownership of it. And I talked to some lawyer friends of mine in the industry, and they said, you don't want to give up ownership of the game. And so I said, yeah, okay.
Hmm.
So I told them no, thank you, and I don't want to talk about exactly who it was. I think people who know the channel probably know, but the great company and great people, and I was kind of sad it didn't work out, but it was just one of those things. But I would have loved to have had a game published through them, and I think they're good people. Anyway, so I kind of was, trying to get jobs and stuff, and so it was kind of on the back burner. But ended up speaking with Kevin Bertram at Fort Circle Games, and I was talking to him about it, and he was interested, but he wanted me to demo it for him. So it was just a matter of us getting together. And then last March, that's
Oh,
where I went to Fort Circle in Washington D.C. and I demoed the game for him, and he really liked it. And so he asked me to send him another prototype. So we're just kind of waiting to see where things are going there. I know with the whole tariff thing, that's kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
causing some issues. So
Looming.
I
Yeah,
and I told him, I told him, I said, look, this is a hobby for me. I don't have my ego wrapped up in this. And
yeah.
if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And if it takes a little while, it takes a little while. But, so, but anyway, he's looking at that right now, and hopefully maybe we can get it published through, Fort Circle Games. We'll see.
We're wrapping up here,
Mhm.
or at least we're landing in the plane. What either company or designer is doing the most phenomenal work right now?
So one of my favorite, well, there's a lot of good designers and companies. One of my favorite designers right now is David Thompson. Um, I was very fortunate when I was in Wyoming a couple of years ago. I was on a committee. We brought in people to talk about stuff, and we brought him in. And so he came, and I met him, and he's just a super nice guy. But he has designed, and it's not just him. He's got people work with him, Trevor Benjamin, a few others. they've come up with some just stellar games. I mentioned that Europe divided earlier, but
Hmm.
his piece de resistance is the Undaunted series. He
Okay.
did Undaunted. Are you familiar with Undaunted Normandy
I
or?
have not played it, but I'm aware of it. It
Okay,
gets high marks from a lot of.
do yourself a favor. It is such a good game. And then, of course, he did the Normandy, but then he did the Undaunted Stalingrad, which
Stalingrad,
is a
yeah.
campaign game, which my wife and I are still muscling through. Great game. It's just hard to get her to the table sometimes. Um, they came out with Callisto, which is
Sci-fi.
a science fiction version of it, which is really cool. And then they did Battle of Britain, which is good, North Africa. But he also did a bunch of solitaire games called the Valiant Defense series for DVG, which is uh, Pavlov's house in the Battle of Stalingrad, soldiers in postmen's uniforms about the first day of World War II in Poland, Lazarenth Ridge and the Battle of the Bulge, Castle Itter about right at the very end of the war. So he's done a lot of good stuff, but then he always just comes up with these kind of random things I never see coming. He came up with one a little while ago called General Orders. And I got the sequel there. I haven't played it yet. I got to review it. But General Orders is a World War II worker placement game.
Hmm.
It's like, what? It's like a war game, but it's a worker placement game. And it's just this fun little game, plays about 20-30 minutes. But that one was just a heck of a lot of fun. But
What's the magic that he provides? If you could quantify or qualify it.
you know, he I think he just kind of hits things, he comes at things from directions you don't expect. Like again, the Undaunted series. This was a game that people were telling me. I didn't play it when it first came out. It was a while after it came out, but people just saying, "Cody, you gotta play it, you gotta play it." And when things get hyped up for me, they're usually not that good. But I was able to get a copy and I played the game, and it's a squad war game, a squad level war game based on a deck building mechanic. So the cards you get based on it, and there's this great idea at the beginning of it. You get four cards every turn, every round. You and your opponent get four cards. Now, one of your cards, all the cards are listed. They do different things. There's different actions on them. They're listed like 1 to 9, I think. And then one card doesn't, maybe it's a zero, I can't remember, but it doesn't do anything for you. It just takes up space, and you get some of these. But what you can do on your turn is you have to play an initiative card to see who goes first, which is very important in the game. Now, you can play one of these high level cards, but then you can't do all the cool stuff on the card for
Yeah,
the
yeah.
your units. Or you can play this card which does nothing for you during your turn, but you're going to go last. You're going
Hmm.
to go second, And it's such a good system because I'll tell you right now, the mark of a good game, and this is one of the most important things I'm going to say in this whole conversation, the mark of a good game is tough decisions, tough choices.
Yeah.
And that game does
Agonizing
tough.
choices.
Exactly. And that
Yeah.
game does it well. The best game ever of all time for tough choices. Boy, and I'm excited because I'm gesticulating. The best game of all time that does tough choices is Twilight Struggle. Have you played that by Jason
No,
Matthews?
I've heard about it. But
Okay, because that's a game where it's Cold War. You're playing throughout the Cold War. You get a hand of cards. It's CDG. You can play it for the event if it's your color or the points. But if you play it for the points and it's your opponent's color, they get the event. So
hmm.
something bad's going to happen. So I have never played a game that consistently makes you make the best of bad decisions. And it's brilliant. It is, and he's done a few other games in that line, but
Yeah.
I love that game. It's so
There's
good.
this delicious masochism that you're pointing to. We were playing My City, and it's a tile placement kind of Tetris like game, and it's legacy light, so the game board changes depending on how well you do in each iteration of the game. But there's these points where you're like and I start my wife's like looking at me because I'm laughing because I'm in so much pain. I'm like, this is so terrible. This is so terrible. And I
Yeah.
get so much delight over that just being kind of painted into a corner and then seeing how
Right.
I'm going to get out of it and stuff like that.
No, that's yeah. I love that stuff. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
You asked too about companies. So about 10 years ago, if you asked me the best company, the best game producing company, hands down, no question, I would have said Fantasy Flight Games. They produced the kind of games that I loved. And every year they would announce games. They go to Gen Con, which is going on right now. They go to Gen Con and they would have their in-flight report and they would announce, 15 games. And usually all but two or three of them, I was just super pumped for. I was
Hmm.
super pumped for. And Fantasy Flight Games really kind of they went through a lot of changes and they were bought out and they kind of changed their dynamics and they're doing more CDG stuff. And once in a while they'll still come out with something that's pretty cool, but it's not what it was for me. It's
Hmm.
not that same thing that it was for me. But there's a lot of good companies today that are pumping out consistently good stuff. Worthington Games puts out some great kind of light war games that I really enjoy. GMT Games is still putting out stuff that is really fun. They did I, Napoleon, which is a solitaire
Hmm.
card game where you're like going through pretty much all of Napoleon's career, which is really good. And I actually played that with a buddy of mine. It was a solitaire game, but we played it together. It was really a
Yeah.
lot of fun. Um, One of the companies that I'm really enjoying now is Renegade Game Studios, and I've done some work for them as far as preview videos and stuff. I just did a preview video for them for the GI Joe Risk Special Missions game.
Oh, okay.
And so when I was a kid, that like I love GI Joe. GI Joe was my favorite, and they came out with a few years ago the GI Joe deck building game, which is probably my favorite straight card deck building game. It's just amazing, and I played it again a couple times last week, and I
Why? Why is
loved.
it amazing? The aesthetic, the
Well,
choices, the
I loved
flow.
I love the theme, obviously, right? Because I was a kid, so it's a little bit of my childhood, which I love. But from a gameplay perspective, what I love is it's a deck building game. But what you do is you have these story missions and you're trying to defeat the story missions, but then these other side missions come out that you have to deal with. And how you do that is in your deck, you have different kinds of cards, and some of them are specific Joes. And you have to send Joes on missions. They need vehicles to go on missions. So you have to be able to get the vehicles to go on the missions to defeat them. But what you're doing is the specific stories, missions or side missions, they have skills like martial arts or explosives or recon or stealth or tech. They have different kinds of skills. And then the Joes have those skills on them. Now, if you just send a Joe on a mission, um, you're going to roll one dice. But if they match the skill, then they get to roll whatever the printed number is on there. So the whole
Hmm.
game, you're trying to maximize your the number of dice. And of course, I love dice chucking. I love dice rolling. So there's ways to try to you're doing everything you can. And you got other cards that kind of help you, do a re-roll or maybe in certain circumstances give you another dice or something like that. And so that is it's just all about trying to get these dice rolls to work for you with card manipulation and deck building. And it's just incredibly fun for me. I really love that
Hmm.
game. But they did that, and then, like I said, this new GI Joe
Risk.
Risk game is a lot of fun because it's not like standard Risk. It almost feels more like an Axis and Allies. And they did a GI Joe Axis and Allies game, which is pretty fun. But this Risk game feels more like Axis and Allies, but it's also got elements of like Star Wars Rebellion, which is one of my favorite games that they kind of put in there too. And because you got leaders and so it's just something really kind of new and interesting and different from traditional Risk with an IP I love and some really fun gameplay. They did a game 2021, 2022, called My Father's Work, and it's my wife's favorite game.
Is that's
And
out of print? I
I think it
think.
is. I think it
Yeah,
is.
'cause I've
But
heard it spoken really highly of. But I
it's
can't find
got
it.
some of the best components. It looks beautiful. It's got a flip
Yeah.
book, but the whole conceit of the game is you play three generations of a mad scientist family.
Oh.
And you're trying to work toward building a masterwork, but you're scoring all these points along the way. And then as the generations go by, you flip over the book and you can kind of see the village evolve in different ways. And you've got this app, and at some point the app says, give it to this player, and that player can make specific choices that can affect everybody. I was playing
Hmm.
a game with my wife, and I was it was about I don't know, we're into it. It's a longer game. It's about a 3 hour game, and we're into it about an hour. And my lab burned down, and so I had to like hurry and do all this other stuff because my lab burned down. Well, then about an hour later, I get it, and it tells me, the other player burned your lab down, and I just shot her this look, and she just started laughing. She made the choice to burn my lab down. So, but it's fun. But and again, it's a great way to tell a story
Yeah.
and provide a great kind of story experience
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
that. Again, one that I'm talking about years later.
Yeah.
But so Renegade's done a lot of good stuff. Come On, I'm a big fan of Come On, but they are I think they're having some
They're
troubles now. I love
teetering.
Zombicide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm upset because I've got some.
Kickstarters in the
yeah,
pike.
some stuff in the
Yeah.
pipeline. So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that works out. But I do like Come On a bit. Gosh, I could go on and on talking about all the. I just played for the first time Return to Dark Tower. I did a review of that here a little while ago. That came out a few
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. That is such a fun
Your
game.
review was very glowing. I could tell you
Ah,
had a lot of fun playing
we
that.
did. We did. We absolutely enjoyed that.
Yeah. If somebody's stumbling on this interview and they're finally like, okay, fine, I'll check into these board games, and they've only ever played the standard Scrabble, Risk, and stuff like that. What would be a good, not quite gateway game, something that is a bit challenging, but would really be a good introduction to all
Hmm.
the things that are possible in this
So
landscape?
when I talk about when I do talk about gateways, obviously I bring up Catan, which incidentally I just played Catan again. They came out with the sixth edition. I just played that again the other night. I forgot how much fun it is. I still love
Okay,
Catan.
I'll
I
have to
still love
give it
Catan.
another.
And if you can find it, the Star Trek version is my favorite version of
Oh,
Catan.
okay.
Yeah, because you can play roles and stuff. It's fun. But anyway, um, and then Ticket to Ride, of course, is another great gateway game. But
Hmm.
honestly, if I were to recommend kind of a maybe something a little more recent and a little more meatier, one of my favorite games to introduce people to the hobby is Horrified. Have you
Hmm.
played any of the Horrified games?
No, I haven't.
It's a very simple game. It's a cooperative game where the first game there's several in the series now, but the first game is the Universal monsters. So you got Count Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, Wolfman, and what you do is you've got like items all around the board. And you got a map of like Transylvania and the different locations, and essentially you've got monsters. And you determine how many monsters you're going to play with. You can play with like up to six. You don't want to play with that many. You usually play with like two or three, four if you're feeling daring. But each monster has their own little mini game
Hmm.
in order to defeat them. So you're trying to get these tiles that are the items, usually to different locations, and somehow that lets you manipulate the mini game. Like I think Dracula, you've got to find all of his coffins and destroy
Hmm.
them, and the Wolfman you have to, or the Invisible Man you have to prove he exists, and there's just all these different fun little games. But then, as I say, they've got one with American monsters like the Jersey Devil and stuff like that. Then you've got Bigfoot. They
So
did.
what I'm gathering from you is that there's levels to the game. Like there's
Mhm.
one level of the game, and then as you're playing, you have to do other. You kind of
Yeah, yeah.
switch gears a
Mhm.
little bit, and so
Yeah,
there's these tiers.
to meet the specific requirements of the monster you're fighting, right? But that is a game, like I said, that I've brought people into and they've loved. Now, I'll tell you right now too. I think uh, I might just mention Return to Dark Tower. Now you're not going to be able to buy that one because it's $200
Yeah.
game, right? But if you got somebody like if somebody was saying, "Have you got a fun game? I don't play many games. I'd like to try." I would totally do that. And cooperative games are easier to teach than competitive games. I think a lot of the time. But I would totally say, "Hey, let's play. I think you'll really enjoy this one," and I think they would because it's such a uh, it's not a hard game to play and to learn,
Hmm.
but there's a real depth there and there's some real strategy there, and then you've got this huge toy factor
Yeah,
with the
because it's got a
tower
big
itself
electronic tower right in the
and
middle, looming in the middle of
and
the.
and the app. And I actually went
Yeah.
out and I bought a TV for this game room so that
Oh.
everybody can see that while
Oh
I'm
yeah.
doing it. And yeah, we've
What's the
had.
magic of Return to Dark Tower? What's
So it's
the.
a cooperative game where you are all trying to defeat a monster, but the monster is hiding in the dark tower. So you have to fulfill a quest within like 6 months, and you don't know how many turns are going to be in each month. So within 6 months, you have to defeat the certain quest. And then there's all these little side quests and mini quests that you go on each month too.
To get
And
powered
then
up to.
yeah, exactly, to get powered up. Meanwhile, you've got these buildings in your kingdoms, and these skulls will pop out of the tower at the end of every round, end of every turn, rather, to show your turn is over. You put one of these skulls into the tower, and then at random times they'll spit back out. And then, depending on the side they spit back out, you have to put them on the buildings in that section of the board. Well, if you get too many, then those buildings are destroyed, and those skulls leave the game.
Mm,
And one of the lose conditions is if you run out of skulls to put in at the end of your turn, you lose the game, right?
hmm.
But if you can get to that last quest, the monster comes out of the tower, and then you have to go and fight him. And it can be very difficult, but not so difficult that it loses its fun. And a cooperative game you should always lose a cooperative game at least 70 or 80% of the time, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah.
because you want to lose a cooperative more than you win, because when you do win, you
Yeah.
accomplished something.
Yeah. 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 So what's coming up with your channel? Do you have a mini series? I guess you opted out of Gen Con this year, but
Here's the thing. I've never been to Gen Con. I don't do a lot of conventions.
mhm.
I've been to really honestly the only conventions I've been to are I've been to SaltCon a few times in Utah, and then I went to the Circle DC one. Those are the only conventions I've ever been to, and I'd like to go to more, but honestly, I don't know that I'll ever go to Gen Con because it. I see the pictures of just that flood of humanity, and I'm like, that does not look fun to me at all. I'm not. I'm not like agoraphobic. It's not like I hate crowds or anything like that. But when you're all there packed tight like that,
Yeah.
like I see in
Yeah.
some of those things, yeah, I'm not a fan. But I wouldn't mind going to some other conventions at times and hang out. Yeah, and honestly, the coolest thing about when I went to DC here was I met a lot of great people that
hmm
I've been friends with online,
Yeah.
and I've seen their stuff. I briefly met Rodney Smith from Watch It Played, who I've always admired.
hmm
I met Jason Matthews, who designed Twilight Struggle. He actually took us out to dinner or lunch. We went to Arlington. We went to a restaurant that's been around since the Revolution. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson ate there. That was kind of cool. So I met a lot of and a lot more great people that I've always really respected and liked. So that to me, more than anything, that's the draw of a convention is
Yeah.
meeting
The
some of those
connections.
people. And
Yeah.
and I don't mean to sound conceited or anything, but I had a lot of people come up to me and say, Cody, I really like your channel and stuff. And it kind of validates what you do because this is a
Yes.
hobby. It's not like I'm making a ton of money doing this.
Yeah.
And it's nice to know there are some people that care. I had
Yeah.
one guy come up to me and he said he didn't even know about that convention until he saw it on my channel. So he thanked me. I was like, oh,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
yeah.
We
And
we
that
look at
stuff matters.
on this side of the camera or the computer, we see all the numbers, but it's really
Yeah.
difficult to translate those numbers into actual people until you meet them in the flesh.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So,
No.
what's coming up for the channel?
Well, a lot more
Discriminating gamer.
reviews.
Why did you land on discriminating instead of indiscriminate
And
gamer?
this, oh, I don't know. I honestly, I think I had a thing in my mind where I was thinking it'd be funny to be like the discriminating gamer, the tuxedo, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
gorgeous women. I was just thinking about that. I wasn't
Gorgeous
going to do it,
women in the
but
game
yeah,
game
you know,
board
and I was just thinking
review
about
discrim.
that. I don't drink, but I was holding a martini or something.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about something like that. And I
Hmm.
was at my friend's house and I was setting up the website that we had for it at the time. And he said, "Okay, well, what name do you want it?" And I said, "The Discriminating Gamer."
Yeah.
So it was just it wasn't really anything that was really well thought. And I've taken some flack from that at times. People have said some unkind things, and I was like, okay, whatever. You're always going to get haters.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I got more reviews coming up. I got a lot more reviews and unboxings. Ray does some great unboxing stuff for us here, so we got more of that coming up. I just like I said, I've just been publishing some of the stuff on the Battle for Hoth, and I got some
hmm
more videos for Battle of Hoth coming up, which I'm super excited about because I'm
You're a
really
big
enjoying
fan of
that.
that. Yeah.
Right now that's a contender for Game of the Year. Lord of the Rings, Fate of the Fellowship, which I just put my review up for. That's a contender. Vantage from Stonemare Games. I don't know if you've played that one yet,
I
but
haven't played it,
that's
but it's
that
pretty hot stuff right now.
you might get a kick out of that one. That's pretty fun too. It's another cooperative game, but that's pretty good. So I'm looking at that. I've got of course, some top 10 lists coming up, and I keep thinking. I'll tell you what I would really like to do on the channel is this. I'd like to have kind of interview sessions with people I admire. But again, I'm such a Luddite, and it's like I got so much on my plate right now. Like I said, I'm trying to finish my book.
Yeah.
I just don't know
Yeah.
if I got the time to learn right now. But I'd
Yeah.
like to do something like this in the future. So
Yeah. Well, Cody, thank you so much for taking time out of your
absolutely,
busy schedule to hang out with me and answer some
absolutely.
questions. I
Let
really
me
enjoy
ask
your
you.
content. Yeah. Yeah, you
Oh,
got
thank
questions
you.
for
Let me
me?
just ask you. So what again? If you could inform me, what was exactly the motivation for you wanting to interview me? Was it just you like the channel, or?
Yeah, I like your channel. Well, I really enjoy board games. and I think that they're kind of it's an up and coming hobby, but maybe it's saturation. But I don't see a lot of people from the outside board game culture talking to board game culture people, and I wanted to
Right.
give it more breathing room and learn more about why different people are into it. I interviewed John LaRufa a few weeks ago, and you were just next on my list. And
Oh,
because
that's
I
cool.
just enjoy your stuff, and plus because you have a history channel too, I was hoping we'd
Yeah.
go from board games to history and history to board games, and just open it up the
Yeah, we
conversation.
bounced around a little bit there, so yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm glad. This was a lot of fun, and like I say, when you
pinged you.
emailed me, yeah, I was like, oh, hey, that's
Is
is that
that
the
that guy?
Evergreen guy?
Is that the
Yeah,
guy?
so yeah, but no, but I really appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun, so
Excellent.
thank you.
Well, I'll link to your work down there in the description, and hopefully
And
people come check
when
it out.
was this going to be up, do you think?
Oh, I have no idea. A couple
Okay.
weeks, a week, 2 weeks. It always depends on how my other interview queue shapes up
Sure.
because I
No,
have
it's
other
all good.
people. But I'm gonna end the
I
recording
know the
now. We can
feeling.
talk off the recording. Thank you very much, Code.
Mhm.
All right, cool. Thanks, man.